one and all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. February 21st, first edition. Wednesday. So often, then we talk a little bit about we have a little fake topic that we find so fascinating. And today is one of those. I think you're going to find, I mean, if you already saw the title for this, maybe that's got you queued up. But if you don't yet have an experience with a real live wizard and a heathen, well, this is your day. This is your day. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast.
Yeah, so
Dan, here it's going to be 47 degrees and sunny today.
We might hit 60. So. Yesterday it got up to 60. It was like, wow, okay.
Laughable. Just laughable. This is Michigan and Minnesota, friends, that we're talking about here. This is not Alex in Florida. This isn't Jim in California. This is Minnesota and Michigan, where it's 47 and sunny and 60 breezy.
In February.
Yeah, in February 21st, to be clear, that 2024. Thanks, Biden. Appreciate the great weather. Hey, Dan, do you remember when we walked into the Parliament of the World Religions this summer, and we were like, all right, we're setting up a booth, working with a project that Joe Carson, frequent listener, made possible to have there, where we're talking about whistleblowers, and then we're also doing our Vote Common Good thing at a little table at basically, if you've ever been to a trade show, this thing is a trade show of the world's religions.
Yeah, just
conference,
rows and rows of booths and exhibits, as well as the big main room with stage and lights and all that. But
yeah, just the classic, then a big lobby and people with lanyards around their necks, but in this case it was people from all around the world representing world's collection of religion. And this is a meeting that happens on a fairly regular basis. It's not annual. Sometimes it goes 10 or 20 years. I think maybe it happened once and then had a 30-year hiatus and then was back on. But anyway, it happened.
But it's been going since the 1800s. I don't know if you remember this. It's been a thing for a while.
Yeah, like around the World's Fair or something, if I remember right. Maybe Chicago World's Fair, the book, The Devil in the White City. By the way, have you ever read the book, The Devil in the White City?
No.
A tremendous, historic, fictional book. True story about the World's Fair in Chicago, one that brought a number of things to the humankind, including the Ferris wheel. A whole story about how the Ferris wheel was a technology and an engineering feat that outdid the Eiffel Tower from the previous World's Fair. And there was all this competition about what thing was going to make this World's Fair famous. So all kinds of things. I think Aunt Jemima pancake mix and maybe some other food like Skippy peanut butter or something.
Huh.
So World's Fair. It
was a big year.
And also, it's like 1890 something. And also a murder, a mass serial killer working the World's Fair. And so this book tells the story of both of these things happening at once. And it is tremendous. I think the person's name is Eric Larson who wrote it. And I rarely remember a random author like this, but so good. So if you're going on vacation or you just need a little read, The Devil in the White City, highly acclaimed.
I'm going to have to check that out. But yeah, it was fascinating. We got together at the Parliament for the World's Religions. Didn't know what to expect. I liked the idea, but zero expectations of what it would be like. And it was just a kaleidoscope of colors and religious garb. Just found it fascinating in all the ways. And it was a reminder of, we have religious garb in our country. We have some people wear robes. Some people it's just a suit and tie, but it's a very particular look depending on your denomination. And as a reminder that we all play dress up a little bit.
It's all cosplay.
It's all cosplay.
Life is cosplay. So if you think, what wisdom could come out of some guy that wears the same hat and outfit every time he goes somewhere? Well, I was pleased to meet Oberon the wizard, who also had a hat on, because I wear this silly blue hat all the time in my professional work, and often the same outfit, a blue shirt of some variety, and then almost always the same pair of like burgundy pants. It's a bit of a uniform. So if you've never noticed, or no, nobody should care, but it just makes it easy for decision making about what I'm going to do when I do work stuff. So I put that outfit on all the time. And I was wearing this during this interview with Oberon, who you will see in a moment, is dressed as a wizard with a wizard hat, a beard that should be a national treasure, and a staff in his hand and a robe. The
And
whole deal.
he'll be quick to correct you. He's not dressed as a wizard. He is a wizard, and this is how he dresses.
Yes, that's so right. That is so right. Yeah, he's not dressed up as one. He's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm a real wizard. And he's not goofing on Elvis here. Like it's a part of what he's doing to connect himself to a previous era and to pull that forward. So we met him, and if you listen to the podcast from a week ago, we did an interview with a person who practices Jain religion, faith. That was so great. I've still been smiling about that, re-listening to that interview. Well, the same day or earlier that day, we had met Oberon and asked him if he would come over, and he did. And he's such a sweet person and so wise. And remember, Dan, we found out from a lot of the other people in the kind of in the pagan religion traditions in the United States and Canada, they were like, I cannot believe Oberon is here, the wizard. Like, to them,
it's a big deal.
Really big deal. And at first, my attraction, and maybe yours too, to him when I first saw him was like, oh, there's Quirky. I would love to interview Quirky.
Yeah.
A 30-minute conversation with him, you're like, this guy's not just quirky. This guy is really up to something, and his own story. And again, what we mentioned last week, for those of us from the tradition that we come from, the Protestant, Christian, and evangelical traditions in America, trying to push the system of our religion to be better in the world. That's the same thing he's trying to do with paganism and heathenism. So a tremendous conversation. Yeah. And then you'll hear another interview with Carl the Heathen, a self-chosen reference heathen. I think he was probably given the name Carl, if I remember right, but heathen he picked. So it's not used as a derogatory term at all. He practices heathenism, and we'll get to that in a minute. Maybe we'll do a little commentary in between these two interviews. But you'll also hear from Carl, who also has some garb that he wears and things that represent the heathen pathway forward, and it's kind of into, like, for the heathens, it's like really into the gods, like Zeus,
like the Norse, more the Norse gods, yeah, like Thor and Odin and all those, yeah.
I mean, they talk about Thor and Odin like people talk about Jesus and the Holy Spirit. It was just utterly fascinating, and a lot of really helpful material that came out of these conversations with these two. So just I really
and what's
it.
interesting with Carl is he's a part of this heathen, I don't know if you'd call it a denomination or a strain of heathenism, but it's inclusive heathenry. And so they are explicitly against any of the like white nationalist, white supremacist, Germanic symbolism that sometimes gets hijacked from these Norse traditions. But it's really interesting. And like a lot of the people at this parliament, these are people kind of leaning more progressive within their traditions. They're trying to push things forward and make it a bigger tent that includes everyone. And a lot of them come out of, well, these two in particular have had experiences in the Christian church and are like, well, this isn't a big enough tent. It doesn't include people like me. It doesn't include people that I love. And so I got to find something else. And so both of these guys are a part of traditions that, well, Oberon the wizard started his own church called the Church of All Worlds, which we'll get into. But it's just a fascinating human story.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot. And Oberon is like a religion founder. I mean, it's around I don't know.
Like started this religion back in the 60s, and that's been kind of a big part of his life's work is creating a new religion, Why not?
Yeah. So anyway, just going to be delightful. Gather up the family, call the aunties, call the children in, get them out of the streets, bring them around the video box there in your house or your car, wherever you are, and let them tap into a wizard and a heathen in this wonderful conversation. Now, again, we're in the conference center, the McCormick Convention Center in Chicago. So that's the setting. We have a little booth. We invite people to come sit in our booth. And somehow the juxtaposition of like talking about religion and its meaning in the world, and how we do it with a wizard and talking about the pagan religion and then talking with a heathen, while you're in the middle of a conference center and people are walking around with lanyards on and tote bags and tables of displays, it's all just too much. So anyway, that's the setting, our little on the go fast rig that we have there. And but I think you will think you might enjoy it quite a bit. And please keep up in the comments. We will be commenting as well as we go, and we'll give it after the Oberon. We'll chat with you here in a minute too.
So here is Master Wizard Oberon Zell.
Well, Oberon, thanks for being on our Common Good podcast.
My pleasure.
Remind everybody that we are sitting at the Parliament of the World Religions event in Chicago, and your presence and outfit is a standout. A number of people earlier, a day or two ago, said, "Have you seen the person in the wizard outfit?" And so it's such an honor to speak with you. Thanks for sitting with us for a minute.
Well, it's very amusing because I don't really think of this as a wizard outfit. I am a wizard, I mean,
that's right.
It's not really an outfit. These are my clothes,
Yeah, it's like my podcast outfit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so can you tell me about what it means to be a wizard and what it is that you're...
Well, a wizard, the word means wise one, basically, and wizards are people who are expected to know stuff that people come to for advice and counsel, and generally helping to make the world a better place. It's not a religious vocation. It's a profession like being a professor or a philosopher or a teacher. You can be a wizard in any religion. I do have a religious affiliation, as would pretty much anybody, but it's not. Wizardry is beyond that. I'm a pagan in my own faith.
Yeah.
And my particular tradition there is the Church of All Worlds, which I founded in 1962.
You founded the Church of All Worlds?
I did.
Wow.
I'm the founder
of that.
Nice
to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was, amusingly enough, inspired by a science fiction novel. But then again, one can say that all the religions were inspired by some myth or other, and I just regard science fiction as mythology.
Nice. Can you tell us about that experience back in 1962? What was going on and why? There's obviously, we're at this event, it's clear there's a lot of religious expression.
There certainly is.
We're just in one little corner of a massive movement.
Well,
what brought you to want to start something fresh and new?
Well, that's a very good question. I like that a lot. I grew up on world mythology. My earliest reading as a child was the Greek myths. And so I was always fascinated. I pursued mythology, folklore, fairy tales. Eventually, that led me into reading fantasy and science fiction. And during the 50s, when I was growing up, a science fiction author named Robert Heinlein wrote a series of a dozen juveniles that one came out every year, and they were sort of the Harry Potter novels of my time. You'd wait for the next one to come out. And the local librarian would always set it aside for me and say, "Hey, the new one came in for you,"
Okay.
And they were all about what does it mean to be fully human.
Love it.
Science fiction can address that the way no other literature can, because it can offer in comparison to what. So this whole series of very amazing teaching stories came out in wonderful stories. Several of them have been made into movies and TV series, of which at that time the most popular was one called Tom Corbett's Space Cadet, which came out of one of his stories called Space Cadet. And that kind of was a precursor to Star Wars and the whole assumptions of the Academy, and all that. So it had quite an influence. And when I completed high school, and for me, high school in the 50s was just like the movie Pleasantville. That's exactly how it was.
Where did you grow up? Where was this?
It was actually near here. I grew up in Crystal Lake, which is northwest of Chicago. And my uncle had the gift concession at the Prudential Building, Zell's Card and Gift Shop.
All right.
That's my name. And And on my summertime, I worked at the top of the rock, at the gift shop, way at the top of the Prudential Building, which was at that time the tallest building in Chicago. And on the weekends when I didn't have to work, I'd come in and go to all the museums here. So I was very connected with Chicago. It was kind of my home territory.
Yeah. Even though you lived in like a small Pleasantville town, you were coming into the...
Yeah, it was about 50 miles out, and they had a train. It was a bedroom community.
I know you were going somewhere with that story, but can I circle back to that comment you made about science fiction gives us an additional way to ask the question, what does it mean to be human? Because we can contrast it with something else.
Exactly.
And that's a real wizardly comment. That's really wise.
Well,
you mean like, because then you can introduce aliens or
other cultures and civilizations or religions
to reflect on the question of humanity.
Exactly.
A lot of people who don't pay attention to science fiction don't know that that's what it's doing. They think what people are doing is talking about just other silly things that aren't real.
Right.
But you're saying, no, there's another way to read science fiction, which is a reflection on the human endeavor, which just feels like what religion wants to do, is ask the question, can we be human in a more flourishing way?
Precisely. I mean, the great questions are, who are we and where do we come from and where are we going and how will we get there? These are the big questions we all have to ask ourselves. And of course, the one that I always tell people when people ask me, well, you're a wizard, what should I do? And I say, you should figure out what you're here for and do it. Huh. So that kind of stuff. That's the kind of way.
What are you here for? What did you figure out that you're here for?
I figured out back when I first went off to college in 1962, or 61. 1961. Again, high school in the 50s, college in the 60s, archetypal eras.
Wow, you're just right on the money.
I was.
Yeah.
Was one of the first classes said, draft a mission statement for your life.
Wow.
And my mission statement, which I've always held to all these 60 years later, was to be a catalyst for the coalescence of consciousness.
You already you had alliteration built in when you were 18 years old.
I love alliteration.
A catalyst for the coalescence. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you do it again.
A catalyst for the coalescence of consciousness. So that's my mission.
All right. So you're a kid.
Yeah.
Your dad owns a gift shop.
My uncle.
Your uncle. Your parents are helping you find books. Are you in religion at the time? Are you doing
really.
all this on your own?
I guess I was. I mean, my folks were members of the Congregational Church, and I loved it. I had a perfect attendance record in Sunday school all the way through high school until I went off to college. So, I was very involved in all of that.
Do you think your alliteration desire started with being a part of the Congregationalist Christian Church at the time?
Possibly. I think it was just that I enjoyed book titles that alliterated.
You like language.
I do. I love language. Absolutely love language.
So you're kind of going to this church, but you're different from your parents in this sense. That's
Very
what
much.
You're saying.
I felt like, as we say in our community, like a changeling, ugly duckling,
Really?
Not part of that thing.
Okay.
And been feeling alone and isolated. I used to go out in the backyard with a flashlight to try to signal the flying saucers to come and take me where I'm supposed to be. That sense of not being of the same people that you're born into was a very common one among us pagans,
Yeah. Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
So a lot of you, when you're together, talking about your growing up and younger years.
We felt alone and isolated, and we were looking, maybe, is there anybody else out there like us? But when I went off to college, I found someone who was for the first time. My friend Lance Christie. And that year, 1961, Robert Heinlein's latest novel culminated his entire series of juveniles with one called Stranger in a Strange Land. And it was brilliant.
Wow.
And it's laid the foundations for the entire cultural revolution of the 60s. The entire counterculture came out of that one book.
Really?
Yep. There were two profound things. The invention of the birth control pill in 1960 and the publication of Stranger in a Strange Land in 61.
Really? Can you recap the book for me? I'm not familiar with it. I was born in 66, so I should have known about this book, I would think, but I don't.
Well, it's one of those things that if you mention it, there's people who will light up and say, oh, yeah, that's the book. And other people say, I've never heard of it,
Okay.
And the basic story is that the first manned expedition to Mars crashes and everybody's killed except one baby who had been born on the journey and who's discovered and raised by this ancient Martian race, indigenous Martian race. So 25 years later, another expedition is successful. They find the young man and bring him back to Earth. but he's been raised in this totally different culture. And think of it like we go to the jungle and get a baby chimpanzee. We bring him back, we raise him up in human stuff, teach him sign language. And imagine if then he goes back to the jungle.
Yeah.
Well, that's the story.
Yeah. It's the story of Jungle Book also, what you're telling, if you remember. Yeah, Mowgli.
It's the story of Jungle Book, exactly. So, it's a very good story. And he just did it with a science fiction flair.
Love it.
So this kid comes back with all these. See, in Jungle Book, the Mowgli is being raised by animals.
Yeah.
But imagine if the same story had been raised by superior
more
aliens.
Sophisticated. Okay, right. I see what you're doing. Yeah.
So that's the story. And he looks at all the things we take for granted, and things like, politics and sex and relationships and religion and afterlife and money and politics, all kinds of stuff that nobody had ever written in science fiction before about. These were taboo topics, but they're ones we just take for granted. And as each of these is examined, the reader becomes one of the companions following along with this Martian kid, whose name is Valentine Michael Smith. And somewhere along the line, he encounters this wise old wizardly character who is in fact the author, Heinlein, who injects himself into all of these stories as the wise old man who offers advice and counsel. So he's the wizard.
Is this your first sort of envisioning of a wizard in your own, like a more sophisticated version than whatever you might see in a fairy tale?
Very much. My concept of wizard has always been the wise old guy who knows stuff and who advises the young. I mean, that's the main job of a wizard, is to be the mentor and counselor for the young hero. That's the reason every story, whether it's Obi-Wan Kenobi or Merlin or whoever it is, Gandalf, that's the job of the wizard.
Who are your youngerlings that you're wizarding
I have
for?
A school,
how are you doing it?
Called the Gray School of Wizardry.
Okay.
And I actually, teach this stuff.
Is it a classic-looking kind of school? Is it you meet outdoors? Do you have classrooms? Do you do it online?
Well, most of it's online.
Okay.
So it's in a magic realm, and there's a virtual campus in Second Life that's quite spectacular.
Okay, I was going to ask,
Right, but
is Second Life still going? Is that app, that platform is still supported and still has people on it? Okay.
And we have a physical campus. We have a manor house in Whitehall, New York.
Okay.
It's this big place, and we got dormitories and classrooms.
Why Whitehall, New York? What?
Well, that's where the person who set this up decided would be the best place to be. It was a dying little community, and property was cheap. You got an old colonial mansion that looked like the part, and there it is.
I feel like there's a radio show called the Moth Radio Hour.
Yeah.
I feel like it comes out of Whitehall, New York.
Really?
But anyway.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Okay, but
Well, anyway, in this concept of the story, the old man, whose name is Jubal Harshaw, makes a mention that maybe with all these ideas you're fermenting here in this community of people following you, you could consider starting a church, because religion is a null area in the law. That's a direct quote. If you can establish a church and get it legally recognized, you can pretty much do anything you want.
The Christian Scientists, I think, had this approach too.
Exactly, or even the Scientologists.
Yeah, that was it. That was the one. Yes, that was the one I was thinking of.
In fact, L. Ron Hubbard and Heinlein knew each other, were friends, and Scientology just kind of made a bet between them about this very subject.
Is this so? Okay,
right.
Yeah.
So he does, and he decides to call it the Church of All Worlds.
Wow.
And the primary ritual is sharing of water, because that water is the primal element that connects us all, and on Mars it's a very rare thing.
Yes.
So you share water with somebody, and the theology is immanent divinity. That we are all divine beings.
Yeah.
We all, we're all like vessels that have all been dipped in the same ocean.
Okay.
And the water is the same that we all contain.
Love it.
So sharing water with someone and saying water shared is life shared.
Okay.
And then thou art God. Is the primal ritual of the whole thing.
Okay.
So my first friend, Lance Christie, that I had met when I first went off to college, and I both read the book. And on April 7th of 1962, we shared water and pledged our lives to living and activating these principles,
So by this point, you're out of college.
Yeah.
You go to college?
No, not quite. No, I didn't get out of college until 65.
Okay.
And at that time, up to that point, we had gotten about 100 people who were water brothers within our little circle. Is that so?
And you were at college where?
Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri.
Okay.
And
how do the good Presbyterians of Westminster College feel about the?
Well, I was
the
definitely
water hood.
Well, they didn't really know exactly about it. A few
okay.
people did, but it was underground. It was kind of
All right.
secretive, you know. It was our secret fraternity. We all adopted magical names.
That's a bit of an important thing for people that feel like outsiders and loners, is
Absolutely.
to have some protection
To find
with
each
one
other and
another.
form some association.
That's
The name that I took at that time was Prometheus. And if
Okay.
you know the legend of Prometheus, that will tell you the whole story. But
Okay.
for those who don't, Prometheus in the Greek myth is the titan who stole fire from the gods
Yeah.
and gave it to humanity.
uh-huh.
So he brought enlightenment to humanity.
Yeah.
And so I identified with that story.
Okay.
It's a good story. So after we graduated, we all went off to different places and we began a discussion. Should we continue this being a secret underground thing,
Yeah.
or should we take it public? And Lance and I, our relationship and dynamic and personalities were Kirk and Spock. Him being the Spock, me being the Kirk character.
Okay.
And so as just absolute buddies, which we remained for our entire life together. He died in 2010, but we remained friends throughout
Wow,
life.
I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sure that meant a lot when you lost
I
him.
know,
yeah.
it was really rough. So he became chosen to head up the secret society end of it, which was called the Atlan Foundation.
Okay.
Atl being an Aztec word meaning water.
Okay.
So we chose that. We liked that kind of stuff, obscure things. And I was chosen to bring it to the public Church of All Worlds, which I did in
Got it.
1967.
Wow.
And as soon as I came public with this, somebody asked a fateful question. He said, "What kind of religion is this?
Yeah.
Are you, funny religions were coming out of the woodwork back
Right.
then. You know, we had the Krishna people and the Moonies and the Scientologists.
Mhm.
And so it's a fair question. So I said, well, having grown up in mythology and folklore, I said, I guess you could say we're pagans. And that was the first time anybody had ever
Right.
claimed to be pagan. Pagan always referred to other people. Those
Sure.
pagans. Nobody ever said us pagans.
Yeah.
I was the first.
Oh.
And with that, I began an entire movement, the pagan movement. That has
Really?
become the fastest growing religious movement in the Western world. And
Do
it's
people
now,
know this in the movement, in the pagan
Oh yeah, everybody
world?
knows it. That's why I get so much attention and honor. I'm the founder.
the
I'm the
founder.
father of the entire pagan movement. Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
And I would hear about some other group, people doing Greek stuff or Egyptian stuff, and I would contact them and say, hey, you guys sound like pagans. I'm pagan. Let's all be pagans together. And people would say, yeah, that's
How
what we
about
are.
This? Come on.
And this had the effect, well, Benjamin Franklin was once asked what was his greatest invention. And he said Americans, because he was the guy who coined that term and united people who had not thought of themselves as any one thing before. They'd
Got
been
it.
Virginians and Catholics and Protestants and Puritans and Vermonters and all that. He created
Wow.
a common identity of
Wow.
Americans that made possible the American Revolution.
Wow.
I did that. I created a common identity as pagans that made possible a pagan movement.
In a lot of ways, religion really performs an identity function for people, doesn't it?
Exactly. And this is what we need, is larger identity functions.
Yeah.
You know. And,
When did you take on the name Oberon? Or was that your given
I
name?
didn't take it on. No, it wasn't. Well, it was given, but I did not. But no, it was given to me in a ritual format that I didn't really have much say about by a person who was a namer with the what was it? The one of those Eastern groups.
Like that's a function someone has,
Yeah,
is
someone
to...
would always name people, and I wasn't a part of their thing, but I met this woman, and she looked at me and said, when I see you, I see Oberon, and it was like this mantle descended from the heavens and wrapped around me, and
You felt it when she said it and thought, yeah, that does fit me.
right. And her partner was a fundamentalist Christian minister,
Okay.
and we were on a river, so I just had him baptize me in the river at that point and bring me up as Oberon, and so I've been Oberon. That was 94.
94. What were you called before that? Prometheus?
No, oddly enough, my previous name had been Otter,
Otter.
which was kind of like a nickname because I was living on a ranch full of hippies, and
you
everybody
were.
had nicknames. So
Yeah. But this naming was different than a nickname.
yeah, it was.
What's the difference between a nickname that you might pick up at a hippie living commune
Well,
versus a naming?
A nickname is what people call you, but it's not who you are. And a magical naming is an identity, is who you are.
Are you a namer now? Do you name people?
No,
ever?
I
Do you-
don't. I think people need to find their own names.
Okay.
We have a class in the Gray School of Wizardry on choosing a magical name if you
Okay.
choose to.
Yeah.
And most of our students, apprentices, do so, and many do not, because
But
it's not a requirement.
but you kept the name that a namer gave you, but
Yeah.
you want to encourage other people to choose their own.
Yeah.
Why didn't you want to choose your own?
I would have if I'd given a chance, you know.
Like you couldn't undo it. You felt like
No.
whatever happened there
All right,
had a permanency to it.
It was, as you say, given. It was given to me, and
How about this?
I had to receive it.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't a comfortable assumption because my wife, Morning Glory, at the time did not want to be identified with the wife of Oberon in the story, Midsummer Night's Dream,
Oh,
which
okay.
is where it comes from, because that was not her.
I
You know, and so we had a little bit of a conflict about
Okay.
that. She continued to be Morning Glory,
Okay.
but I became.
That was a chosen name for her?
That was for her, but
Okay.
as a teenager, you know,
Wow.
we went way back. Again, she didn't pick it; it was given to her
Oh,
in a magical sense.
okay.
So, but I'm all for people finding themselves
Yeah.
a name, and they may be a one that's given to them. It may be one they choose. It's whatever works.
I don't want to over project, but my guess is that you find yourself caring for some pretty tender souls
I
in this
do.
work you do.
It is
That
very
people,
much.
when they find their way to you, they've had a hard run. People
Well,
haven't understood them,
Yeah.
and they haven't understood themselves, and they feel
Well, I worked professionally for 10 years in the slums of St. Louis with the Human Development Corporation, and I worked in family services, and I had clients coming in off the street all the time who were really having a hard time.
yeah.
I ended up kind of specializing in women who were in abusive relationships, which was just heartrending because I would work so hard to help them get out of that, you know? And every time they would go back to the guy, every time. And that was just, for 10 years I did that. And then eventually I just couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I went back into teaching because I'm also a teacher. You know, I got a teacher certificate and stuff because
Okay.
I had two ideas in mind. One was creating a religion that worked, and the other one was creating an educational system that worked.
Okay.
And the religion one took up decades, but I was successful. I'm very pleased.
Yeah.
You know, I think my biggest innovation in that was the concept of Gaia. I was the first person to originate the concept that the entire Earth is a single living organism, equated with the ancient Greek goddess of the Earth, Gaia.
Okay.
And about 3 years, that was 1970, and about 3 years later, a British atmospheric scientist named James Lovelock came up with a very similar theory that became really famous.
Okay.
So now everybody knows about Gaia, but they don't necessarily know it through my
Yeah.
version.
Lens.
They know it through his version.
So you're a school teacher and you're working on the Human Development Project
Right.
as a
Yes.
caseworker or
Yes.
something. Were you able to look the way you do now, or was there a point at which you took on the look that you currently carry?
Well, I grew a beard in college, and I've kept
Okay.
it ever since.
Okay.
So, you know, I've worn different outfits depending on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know,
You have this wonderful blending of your hair into your beard. It's indistinguishable where the hair begins and the.
Well, that's all come from age and being an old man. You know,
Well, it's
I'm
great.
80 years old. You know, so
You're 80 years old.
Yeah.
Well, you're looking really fresh
Well,
and,
thank you.
and yeah.
my beard would have been a lot longer, but I lost a lot of it when I had cancer a while back. You know, and the chemotherapy kind of, you know, took away most of that. So I've been trying to regrow it ever since,
Okay.
but it's never quite recovered.
Yeah.
entirely.
How are you doing with the cancer? Where's
Gone,
that?
completely gone.
Okay.
It was colon cancer, and they took out my entire descending colon and put me on chemotherapy. It was a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Big deal.
How long ago was that?
It was in 2007
Okay.
when that happened.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Yeah. So that adds some complications to life if
It
you don't
did.
have a
It did.
descending colon. Yeah.
And-
yeah. I have
and-
friends
and
that have that
my-
situation. Yeah.
And my life mate, Morning Glory, died 9 years ago. We had 40 years together, and we were an amazing couple together. She
Wow.
was wonderful. And after 9 years, I've just recently gotten engaged to another wonderful, amazing woman.
Is this
that
so?
I'm very excited about.
Okay. So that means there's a marriage coming,
There
or
is.
something?
On next May 17th, we're planning a
Okay.
big marriage ceremony.
Okay. Is there a reason for that date? You seem to be someone who picks things pretty carefully.
Well, it is.
Can only
We got
imagine.
together at an event called May Moon Magic at a pagan retreat center in
Okay.
Tennessee called Serenarid that she was one of the founders of. So we met there this year
Okay.
at the Beltane Festival, which is normally May 1st, but they do it on the full moon closest
Okay.
to it. So next year, The festival will begin on Friday the 17th, and we're scheduling our big marriage for that time.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Did you?
Thank you.
9 years ago when Morning Glory passed, did you wonder if you would ever have this kind of relationship again?
I did, and it'll be 10 years when we finally get married, and I didn't know,
Yeah.
I mean, so I've been kind of on walkabout all that time,
Okay.
drifting around the country. We were in California at the time, and I've been all over the Western Hemisphere visiting people and traveling and on walkabout. And finally, my path took me to Asheville, North Carolina,
All right.
which is where I am now.
Wow. Well, Oberon, this is such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for being so generous with your time and
Well, you're very
sharing your
welcome.
story with us.
I hope you've enjoyed the stories.
I have very much. Cheers.
All right, thank you. Cheers to you, too.
So great. You might be muted still, Doug. Yeah, that was Oberon. And you back? Let's see if maybe I did something over here.
Yeah.
There you are.
Hey. Are your I don't know. Are your cheeks sore from smiling? Is your heart overflowing? I mean, what a guy, right? Just a sweet spirit and attitude. Just downright lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Just downright lovely. And then ends with that, I at some point there at the end, I'm like, oh, this is just two old men sitting around talking about our health. How you feeling? And then he pivots into I fell in love again. I mean, just really, because look, this is the thing. You can wrap your religion in lots of packaging. We all do. You think you wear an outfit like Oberon, you wear a hat like mine, you wear a stole, you wear a collar, you wear tight jeans and white sneakers that cost $700, whatever your outfit is for your public, religion leadership. And in the end, you're people trying to find a way in the world and trying to figure out what you've been told and how you want to live and who you can love and how you're going to go. Like that's what we're doing. Not to take away from all those different outfits and religions and different teachings and different that all really matters too. That's what gives life its. I don't want to flatten them all out and say everything is the same and who cares what's the difference? Because the difference is what makes everything so interesting. You know.
But I love that bit where he's talking about, he started this religion based on a science fiction novel that was really trying to help us answer the question, how do we become more human, more fully human? And I just thought that was really lovely. And hopefully it's the point of all religions to help us, feel at home in our bodies and feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. And I just thought that was really nice.
For sure. And, one of the downsides to some versions of Christianity is that it tends to speak about people being godly in a way that is in opposition to being more human. And I think anytime, the Bible context or whatever is calling people for whatever godliness, it really means to be more human. There's a great phrase of Jesus about Jesus in the Gospel of John where he's called the Son of Man. That was one of the more common, and we immediately want to pivot that into the Son of God. Now, in the Gospel of John, they don't contrast those two. It's the same thing, right? Son of Man, Son of God. But boy, there's a sense that we want godliness to override our humanity. So much so that we have to whip up all kinds of theologies to explain this stuff around Jesus. Like there's a lot of code going on to run that software theologically. And, but I think you're right. Like the call to be human and human flourishing. That's what things are about.
Well, we got time for another.
Come to find out.
You want to jump into another interview here? We've got Carl Bonebright, self-declared inclusive heathen, and we can hop back.
It's like when you're ordering desserts at a big birthday celebration, and you see, like just give us one of each. Let's get the heathens and the wizard, because
and
this
heathens
one's also
would
interesting. A young guy who feels like he's found value in heathenism and understanding the gods, also recognizing that that same tradition, as you mentioned in the introduction to all this, has been hijacked by the alternative right and the white right in America. And he kind of has that look, and he's like, oh yeah, no, we're fighting those people all the time. And so, every religion, every faith is in a context of some kind. And just fascinating.
Yeah. So here we go.
Good. All right.
All right. Well, welcome to the Common Good Podcast. We're here at the Parliament of the World Religions. The longest name, Carl, that I've ever seen for a conference.
I haven't actually heard the second "the" in there yet, so I've just been saying "of."
I know. Well, I did the same thing. I was saying, and I even wrote it as Parliament of World Religions, and then I saw the program and said Parliament of the World Religions, and I think that definite article is actually important because it's, I don't know, seems to work in English.
It does.
But our interest today is not only in Parliament of the World Religions, but is in heathenry. All right, so Carl, I walked by your booth, saw this flyer that says, what do heathens believe? And I thought this is fascinating. When I first walked by, and I'm like, okay, there's people who declare themselves positively as heathens as a way forward. Picked up the brochure, and I'm going to read the brochure, and then we'll let the words become flesh, and you can dwell among us and tell us what a real heathen is.
I'll do my best.
What do heathens believe? Heathens believe in the giving cycle. As the gods, plural, give to us, so we give to the gods, the spirits and the world around us and one another. We believe relationships are made richer and deeper through participation in this cycle of gifts. We give as the gods give, without the expectation or demand for anything in return. I've heard the word heathen I've been in Christianity since I was a teenager, and I don't know, for whatever reason, in Christianity, that's a word that comes up, but I've never heard people talk about it as a positive thing that they're into. So what's a heathen for you?
Well, a heathen for myself and for our organization, the Troth, is kind of reclaiming the word, because heathen was used as a slur, as a non-Christian, a non-believer, someone who, during the period of time when Europe was converting, often by the point of the sword, to Christianity, they had not converted yet. And as an identifier of a Northern European pre-Christian belief system, we are heathens.
So Christianity in those days, 306 to 600s or so, are we talking that period of the Common Era?
The predominant time of conversion was roughly all the way from the 600s to about the 12 to 1300s.
Okay, that period.
Really kind of like the big end cap for it, as far as I understand it, would be the Northern Crusades, which are often forgotten, involved a crusade northward in order to forcefully convert the few remaining pagan collectives up there.
In what we call Northern Europe at this point.
Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, those areas.
So I'm from Minnesota. I'm not Scandinavia myself, but all the people I hang around with are. So this would be the history of those people. And you're saying that Christianity used the term to define all those people who had yet to be converted as heathens.
Right.
And you're picking that frame as your understanding of how you view the world, because there was something positive that you found in that way of thinking and believing and living before Christianity arrived to convert it into something else.
Yes, we appreciate and feel a resonance with the worldview of the gift-giving cycle of, and with the gods themselves as beings. Our organization doesn't really dictate how its individual members interact with the divine. Some of them only view the gods as almost like Jungian archetypes, and they appreciate the worldview of the community that they share among others. Others believe them to be distinct spiritual beings, pure polytheism in the classical sense. I'm one of those, but again, we have members who are across the spectrum.
And what do you call it? Do you call it in the heathenry? Is that the phrase you use, or what? Or as heathens, we believe different things, or what's like?
Yeah, as heathens, we believe a variety of different ways to interpret the divine and how we interact with them and how they interact with us.
How long have you been referring to yourself as a heathen?
I've been So pagan is kind of an over umbrella term that has been used in a modern sense to describe any polytheistic approach.
Oh.
Like a lot of Wiccans call themselves pagans. There's Egyptians, they call themselves Chemetics. There's Greek revivalists, Roman revivalists.
They're all pagans.
Pagan is the umbrella term over
Yeah,
that,
got
kind
it.
of like how you have Baptist and Methodists and
Okay.
everything. They're all Christian.
Yeah.
So heathen is the term that we have agreed to apply to those who worship
I got
the
it.
Norse,
Got
what
it.
we now use the Norse term, so Odin, Freya, Thor, Loki, the Germanic-speaking groups of pre-Christian Europe.
So if you're a pagan from and practicing the pre-Christian Northern Europe expression, you would be called a heathen.
Heathen, another term that a lot of folks use is called ausatru, which is from two words, the aus or ace, the aesir referring to the gods, and true meaning true to the gods.
True to the gods.
Right.
And how long have you been calling yourself that? What's been your journey into this?
I've been a heathen for roughly, I want to say, about a decade now,
Okay.
give or take. My mother was a church organist, so I was raised through a variety of different Christian denominations, whatever hired her whenever we
Okay.
ended up moving. So I've been Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, Church of Christ. And in college, I broke away. I had disagreements with the theology and the infrastructure and all kinds of different things. Kind of had a spiritual wandering. Made my way through Taoism. I've interestingly found that a lot of modern pagans who have stepped away from Christianity usually go through at least one Eastern tradition, Buddhism, Taoism, or Hinduism, and before they end up in paganism.
Interesting.
And then heathenism just resonated with me.
Huh.
It was.
How so? Did you meet somebody? Did you go to a meeting? Find it online? What?
I looked around online a little bit, and my partner at the time encouraged me to just kind of meditate on it. And it's the interesting.
Your partner at the time was a heathen?
No, was just another person who kind of was wandering with me, and
Gotcha.
they're actually Greek now.
Okay.
They work with Zeus and a couple others. It's my ex, so I don't know exactly what they're up to these days. But
Congratulations on that. Healing well done.
Yeah, but anyway, so I did some meditations, and that is something that's actually been encouraged a lot for many people who are approaching this heathenry or paganism in general. Is, well, how do I interact with the gods? What if I feel a draw to Odin or Thor or Heimdall or Hel, the goddess, or Loki? What do I do? You sit quietly, you meditate, and you can make little offerings. The gods, it's very much in the old classical sense where you have a little glass of alcohol or water or whatever you think they might like, place it out, light some candles, and just meditate and see if you feel anything. See if you feel a call. And that's what happened to me. I started doing that. I started reaching out spiritually, and I felt a pull from the Norse deities, and I've been here ever since.
Do you remember the first day you said to someone, "I'm now identifying as heathen"? Is that a day you can
I really
mark?
don't, because it happened online where it was safer and more anonymous a lot. We have several people who are in our organization even who are still in the closet, so to speak. It's called being in the broom closet because paganism and heathenry are still not necessarily safe to be out in places of work or even family in many cases. We've had members who have been fired. There are stories of modern pagans who have had the custody of their children threatened simply for being pagan. So it started out online, and then I'm fortunate that in my career and in my place of work, I am far enough along that he's the weirdo, but he gets the job done. I'm a software engineer, so
Okay.
I can be out safely, and so it probably would have been 3 or 4 years after I personally within my home and within my private life and even online in a few safe spaces truly became a heathen, that I was able to be out and proud, as it were.
Did you feel, before you were identifying as a heathen, when you heard about them or reading, did you think, wow, these kind of are weirdos? Like, did you think that it was odd, or were you like, no, it never seemed, you wouldn't have thought of it as odd?
I never really thought of it as odd, like, you know, the Portland, you know, flaming bagpipe odd, but it was a bit of a surprise. I was surprised that they were around.
Yeah.
To find that there are modern pagans. I mean, we've known about Wiccans since the Satanic Panic, but the idea of sticking to a specific pantheon and working to recreate and restructure and revitalize, and in many cases reimagine, because we don't have enough information, those pre-conversion beliefs and rituals and things like that. I was surprised that it was around, and that's one of the reasons I joined this organization, was to help get that information out there more so that people could find out about it.
So there's a group of people who've come from different heathen paths that join together to represent this larger heathen
there are a few
movement?
Yeah, there are a few heathen organizations out there, and, you know, disclaimer, many of them, and the ones, if you just search the news sites that pop up, will be, how do I put this delicately? They will be aligned with far-right or even white nationalist agendas at times.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like, I've seen that and heard that, partly because of the Northern Europe focused narratives.
Yep. We call ourselves inclusive heathenry because we are inclusive of all social decisions, all social people, every race, nationality, ethnicity. The gods call whom they do, and we are not ones to judge who answers their call.
So within heathenry, you even have inclusive heathens and
folkish is what they call themselves.
Folkish, what the rest of us might call exclusivist or
exclusivist,
separatist,
extremist. Yep.
Probably isn't helping you all in this day and age to have the far right Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, One Percenters, Trump followers.
And I will tell you that our one of the things that our PR group does is when those, like January 6th, let's, you know, there's the shaman. He had a tree of life, and he had a Valknut tattoo.
Yep.
And he had that stupid helmet, and everybody called him the January 6th Shaman Viking or whatever.
Yeah, the QAnon Shaman.
Yeah, the QAnon Shaman. That was it. Yep.
Yeah,
and
Jason, I think, is his name.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's we had to deal with that, and, you know, we keep our eye on the news when organizations pop up. You know, the groups that's buying that church in Minnesota, and they have a compound in Tennessee.
Yeah.
We want to be louder. We want to be in the news more. We want to show that inclusive heathenry is an option, and they do not represent our gods.
It's amazing because Dan and I are from the evangelical world.
Yeah.
We're trying to do that same thing inside the evangelical world, countering these same, so often some of these same people,
right,
and these same movements. And then here the heathens are having to say, well, we have our own problem that's afoot. We should partner on some things.
We really
around all
should.
this.
Yes,
that is actually, to me, really fascinating. So the heathenry organization, I mean, is structured enough that you're here representing them.
Right.
You have a booth.
Right.
You have printed material. Like, there's a whole.
We have a whole publishing wing. We have books that are translations of the. Absolutely, of the Icelandic sagas. That volume 1. We have 3 volumes right now. Volume 1 is history, and that is our own collected materials of everything from the Proto-Indo-Europeans, 2500 BCE, all the way up through the Viking Age, and archaeological finds, ritual tools, reconstructed ritual formats, mentions by contemporaries, Christian documents that have histories that have been written down. So,
do you consider that a a religious text or a sacred text? Or
Heathenry, we like to say, is an orthopraxic religion. It's we practice right action as opposed to an orthodoxic religion where we don't really have a sacred text.
like right belief.
Yeah, the closest
teaching.
The closest thing to a sacred text is probably the Eddas. It's epic poetry from the Scandinavian countries, the two most famous being the prose and poetic Eddas from Iceland, written down by Snorri Sturluson in the 12 to 1300s.
Wow.
And it's funny when some heathens try to almost we call it Edda thumping, as opposed to Bible thumping, with the Eddas. You know, I tell them that the prose Edda was Snorri Sturluson's glorified Wikipedia entry. He didn't write it because he wanted to write down the myths of the people that had converted, because it was 300 years later. He was worried about a slam poetry style going out of favor.
Nice.
Because the poetry of the time relied heavily on a thing called kennings, which were very, very tight, specific metaphors. A prime example being there was a famous Viking king who went on many sea raids, and there was a poem that referred to so-and-so's stallion. And if you didn't know about this king and that he was a seafaring Viking, you wouldn't know they were talking about a boat in this specific poetic instance. And so Sturluson wrote down the prose Edda because you had to know about the myths and the famous people in order to keep up with the poetry.
Wow. I mean, the parallels between that and how people should understand sacred text inside the Christian tradition, so similar, right? Like, it's context of a person trying to respond to a set of conditions in their time, and then over years are re-understood and infused with whole other meanings that then trouble people.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not to say that we can't use these sacred texts or Wikipedia entries to find wisdom and to guide us on our spiritual journeys, but we can't treat them as what's the word? Unquestionable.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. Has it surprised you, knowing what you knew about Christianity in your earlier days, then getting into heathen world, to see so many parallels to the circumstance that any belief system with a group of people that have an ancient story that they're talking through? Are there times where you're like, wow, this is so much more like Christianity than I thought?
There is a lot of similarity, and I think part of that is the nature of religion and how humans interact and splinter and disagree, and part of it is, as far as I know, in terms of percentages, we're at maybe 10% at most of people who would identify as heathen are second generation. So many of our members and people who identify as heathen are converts from Christianity, and so one of the things that we're having to do is kind of figure out what of our spiritual worldview is aligned with those pre-Christian views that we're trying to recreate, and what of it is culturally just kind of baked in thanks to Christianity's domination of Western culture.
Yeah. Do you all have meetings? Like, I'm not saying for the big organization, but in your own group, do you have online meetings, in-person meetings?
Well, the big organization has online meetings on the regular, and including educational meetings. We have what we call Heathen Essentials 101. It's learning through the myths and kind of a guided study through some of the texts of the Eddas, and that meets either, I think, monthly. And for our organization, as I said, we're a service and education organization. We're not necessarily a denomination in the traditional Christian sense, but within our organization we have groups and we have individuals in those groups. The term is kindred, kind of the equivalent to the Wiccan coven or a Christian congregation. And they can be as small as a single family unit, or it could be as big as 20 to 30 people. Our CEO is a part of a much larger group. They have 6 or 7 families. It's almost like a commune where they meet up on the regular. There's mutual aid, and it's I'm jealous, to be quite frank. Where I'm at, we have a very loose collective of general pagans and some heathens. We meet up once a month at the local meadery. Just
Like where is that? Like what kind of
Huntsville,
place is it?
Alabama.
But what kind of place is a local meadery?
The local
like
meadery
a
is
restaurant or
well, it's a fantastic place. It's just this tiny little meadery tucked into an artist collective that's in an old cotton mill in downtown Huntsville. Ravenwood Meadery. It's they we know everybody there. They've got and they set aside this nice big table with sheepskin rugs over on the benches, and we just sit and talk paganism and heathenry once a month.
So one of the things that Christians are, from the traditions that I come from, are
Right.
trying to do is to modernize the expression of Christianity. Like, how do you figure out how to not have to be a 3rd century Roman or a 1st century Palestinian,
Right.
or a 17th century, Swiss person to be Christian?
Right.
And so a lot of people work really hard to do that, right? To modernize Christianity. Some people don't want to do that. They go old-timey, but some people really want to modernize. Is that true inside of heathenry too? Are there people who
Absolutely. In heathenry we have modern heathens who so one of our basic rituals is called a blot, B-L-O-T. The old word translates directly into blood because it would involve an animal sacrifice. Now, modernly, what we can use water and with the pine branch to bless the individuals in the ritual. Some people will use mead or wine if that's the case, and then we have and they self-identify as this. They're called Reconstructionists, and they make every single possible effort to go full 10th century pre-Christian with the garb and the animal sacrifice, and like they reconstruct some of the language for their rituals. They go old school. Not necessarily my bag, but I mean they clearly enjoy it, and they're getting something out of it.
the braided beard is not a common thing? That's
No.
a Carl thing? That's
The
not a
braided
heathen
beard.
thing?
So I freely admit the genetics started to take the hair up top, and I said, well, I'm going to see if I can grow it long enough to braid it one time. And it got to about here, and I'm like, I kind of like this, and it just kept going, and now it's my thing.
Yeah. Now it's
This
your
is my life
signature.
now.
Yeah, but that's more of a Carl look
It is.
than it is a heathen look.
Right.
Is there a particular heathen, like we're here at the Parliament of the World Religions.
Right.
A lot of religions have a look. They have head coverings, they have things you wear, they have pieces that are emblematic of something. Is there something like that inside your version of heathenry that is marking as a heathen?
There is not, actually. And I don't know if you've seen, there were news articles a while back that started coming around, if you keep track of what's going on in the military. Some heathens were actually requesting waivers for beards like the Sikhs have. And while some heathen organizations and priests may do that, there is no heathen look.
So they didn't get it because they couldn't make an argument that across
they won't
the
get
board
it from
heathens-
us, but
yeah.
some out there might. Again, we're not really a denomination, but we are an organization that has respect and reach. And speaking of the military, I don't know if you're aware, the heathen Thor's hammer, the Mjolnir, is this happened 5-6 years ago, is a valid choice for veterans for their gravestone now. The Wiccan Pentacle was about 10 years ago. I'm good friends with some of the people who did that work, but the heathen Mjolnir is now an option for veterans on their grave marker and dog tags.
When you see the Marvel, and I want to make sure I'm in the right universe, when you see the Marvel movie expressions of this stuff, does that help what you all are doing? Or are you like, oh, come on, what you're doing with that, like other traditions have to do when there's a Hollywood version of their thing?
So the if you remember a while ago, I mentioned the Ausatru as true to the gods. Some of the online heathen community have coined the rather caustic term of Marvel true.
Oh, this is just the best.
For the folks who and I personally, the organization doesn't really have a stance on it, but personally, I appreciate anything that gets the Norse deities out into the public consciousness, because quite frankly, we have a lot of folks who come to our organization and say, I saw the Marvel movies and now I'm seeing signs of Loki or Thor everywhere. what should I do next? And it's like, it's a weird kind of evangelism for us, but there are others who kind of go in that odd direction with worshiping Tom Hiddleston, and it's like, that's not quite what we're after.
Yeah. Man, it is just such a treat to me. Obviously, gift giving is the center of the heathenry that you're talking about. I started with that reading. What is the gift that heathenry has that Christianity ignored or demolished or set aside when it moved heathens into Christianity? Like, what was left behind that you think is really the...
No one has asked me that question yet, so we got to get the wheels turning. I think one of the things that a lot of folks have found and appreciated is a closer connection to the earth. There is an animism and a nature spirituality side to heathenry as well. When we talk about gift giving, one of the traditions that fell out of favor with the conversion to Christianity was dressing up and offering like the last sheaf of wheat or whatever, leaving it out in the field as an offering in thanks, or praying or directly offering to Thor for rain and thunder, for fertility, and that kind of reciprocity cycle of having the connection. And this is, again, just my personal experience and viewpoint, but in my experience, the Christian perspective was the Christian God just gave you everything.
Yeah.
And you are grateful for that. But he just gave it to you, and now you are expected to worship him in gratitude and respect, and kind of pass that along to your fellow man. It's kind of a cascade. God gave to Jesus, who gave to humanity, who then you give to your fellow man.
Got it.
And one thing that I've really appreciated about heathenry is the gods give to us, and we give back to the gods in gratitude. And it's never giving an equal thing. It's giving offerings, and that we give back to the land, we give to our fellow man, and they may pass it along, which then eventually may cycle back to us, or it may not.
Wow.
But the gift-giving cycle feels, to me, more intimate, because it's between each being and each moment.
With less reciprocity kind of built into the exchange.
Kind of, yes.
Yeah. Carl, this has been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah. It has, yes.
What else should we know about heathenry? Is there anything else that we didn't...
I could talk for hours. There is so much to know about heathenry. Okay. But again,
that's a good thing to know, is that there's a lot.
There's a lot out there. Right. This is volume 1. There are 3, and each 2 and 3 are bigger than this one.
Wow.
We have a lot to say. The Troth.org is our website.
TROTH.
TheTroth, thetroth.org.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Yep. And you can find out a lot about us there. And it's been great opportunity. Thank you.
Cheers.
I mean, come on. Literally can't make this up. Literally can't make it up. It's just...
It's
so
funny too,
great.
because I was thinking during this video of growing up in a church world where if some of the people I went to church with knew I had a pagan or a heathen on our podcast, they'd be like, "Whoa, buddy." Like, that would be viewed with such fear, and like just talking to someone would be a huge taboo. And I almost think it's because someone knew, like, oh, once you talk to people from different faith traditions, you realize there's so much like us. There's more in common than we realized. And maybe we don't have to be afraid of our neighbors.
Right. right? Like exclusivity is a real problem, right? For so many reasons that are obvious. And then for a few that sneak up on you, like if you think your group has to be the only one that fill in the blank has access to God or has a sophisticated way of understanding the world or compels people to care for one another, whatever it is that you believe your faith way is uniquely able to give you, then you end up needing everybody else to not have the good things that you have, right? So you become, it's a strange impulse to become stingy with the thing that you think is provided by your faith, as opposed to a generous spirit, which says, oh, and this is why I'm a Christian, because I think that the New Testament and Jesus and the Apostle Paul and the other writers were all into this stuff. Like, hey, whatever is true, whatever is good, whatever is right, like be about those things. Don't be picky, and don't be like separating yourself out from those other people as if you're the only ones that are exclusive. And look, religion, as every one of them, has a way to be exclusive. Our conversations, we did many more we did there, were all from people of different traditions, whether they're formal traditions that you'd know well, or ones that feel a little bit more association-like, you know, paganism and heathenry, or, you know, the Oberon's contribution. That all of these are, I forgot what I was even going to say now, but all of these are providing some way forward, right, for people to try to make sense of it all. And I was struck by, because I'm around a lot of people who've given up on Christianity, right? A lot of my friends, a lot of the people we work with, a lot of just people in public. And oftentimes you have people who will just, and I don't critique anybody for reasons they left or why they left or how they explain it, whatever's fine. But sometimes people thing is like, yeah, I just don't buy that anymore. And then you get people like Carl, who's like, okay, my critique about Christianity runs a little deeper. And I'm going to carry that critique over into another area to try to figure out if there's a way to understand the world that can answer those critiques more fully than the religion that I started in. And I found that really fascinating. Like his ability to articulate his struggle with Christianity wasn't that he was mad at Christians. He just found it dissatisfying. And he said, there's another thing I want to try to figure out. And this way of thinking about the world helps me solve that, and has a real gift back to the rest of you. I just thought it was,
and we talk a lot in our circles about what belief does for you in your life, like why, not just why you believe what you believe, but what does it do in your life? And I feel like these conversations point out that the practice of religion, the community, the actions, what you wear, what you read, is almost as important as what you believe. Like a person like Carl seems like he was looking for belonging. He was looking for something that more people could belong to. That's why they went in this inclusive direction. But it's not just a social club either. You want like these rituals and these practices that ground you in something. And I just think that's really interesting.
Totally. Totally. Just so, when you're in a religion like Christianity can be, where it feels like all the big questions already have the accepted answer to them. What are we up to? Why are we here? How do we get along? All this. And when it's like a reference book where you just flip to that part of the book and slide down and read the dilemma, and then there's the answer, which is the way a lot of people feel about religion and Christianity, that it's providing those kinds of one-to-one correlations. It really makes it kind of boring. And both Oberon and Carl, their approaches, at least for them, felt to me like it was all exploratory still, right? Like there was an open-endedness to it. And maybe it's because it doesn't have the same rich, thousands of years of traditions of millions and millions of people and full industries behind providing the answers and clarity and laser-like focus. But there's something in both of these that feels super interesting. And I couldn't help but think the early days of Christianity, as I read about them in church history and in the records that we have in the Gospels and New Testament writings, felt more like what these guys were describing as their experience inside their religion than most of us experience inside of that very Christian religion, right? Like,
Yeah.
had that early vibey, like, hey man, we're figuring this out, and this is a little squishy.
And you read about that in Acts. They're like, well, we've got this issue where like some people aren't getting enough food. We've got these widows. They're like, we have to come up with something to make sure that the widows are taken care of, and like that becomes a part of the religion itself. And you can see that at work with like these relatively new religions in the case of Oberon's church, or hearkening back and uncovering something even more ancient in Carl's case. It's really interesting.
And then Carl's like, hey, we got to figure out, how we don't get dragged back into this textual argument, because that text was written in a very specific context, and I don't want somebody using the text as a club that's going to beat me up around these. Man, so we're all in it.
And the whole like January 6th, like the QAnon shaman had some of the pagan, heathen Norse symbolism, and they're running into the same troubles that we are. We're like, not all Christians or not all heathens. It's like, look, there's some people trying to move this thing forward and others trying to pull it back into a darker time. And that seems to be a universal struggle.
Yeah, right. I feel like, Dan, just a little side note here for, people can see us do our other work. We should pull that clip of Carl when we do the Christian nationalism training as sort of a little side note for people, like, hey, by the way, if you're bothered by the fact that the guys inside the Senate chamber leading the insurrection were doing, a Christian prayer, also know that the heathens were quite bothered by what was going on because of the tattoos and that garb. An entirely other set of signs about how a member of their community or someone who's using the signs of their community was in there doing that. And we do live in this real mashed up world. So yeah, that was but look, I mean, this is the thing that this podcast, I hope, provides for people that listen to it, that I hope our organization Vote Common Good does for people. Just the daily reminder of how interesting people are. Just get them talking for 30 minutes, and by golly, people are interesting, which makes me think this. For those of you that are regulars in this chat, Kimberly, Yabbits, Jim, Peggy, Alex, Mark, others, a bunch of you that are regulars, I feel like we should interview some of you sometime. I think we should turn the tables, maybe do 2 of you in a session or something like this, and just do what we do with other people with you all, because you're equally as interesting and helpful. Your story is a guide for others that they would find so helpful. So if any of you are interested in that, reach out to
side note,
and,
shout out to Jim. He's going to be gone for a month. We'll miss you, Jim.
Jim, where are you going for a month? What are you going to be doing that you're away for a month?
He might already be out of the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll never know. Now we make up a story.
We'll have
about
to ask in a month.
Yep. Okay. All right, y'all. Well, thanks for being a part of all of this. Kimmy, we'd love to have you in on this too. All right. All right. Great line from a Jackson Browne song called "The Rebel Jesus." Which, if you don't know that song, you get done here, go into places where you listen to music and look up "Rebel Jesus" by Jackson Browne, and he has this great line at the end where he's been critiquing Christianity and Christmas a little bit, and then he says, "This is a blessing to you from a pagan and a heathen who's on the side of the rebel Jesus." So if we could play those songs without having a copyright strike, we would. But it's a great little line, from a pagan and a heathen who's on the side of the rebel Jesus, he says.
Yeah.
So I feel like that too. I feel like I became a Janus last week, and now I'm like Oberonian.
People have already been calling me a heathen. But.
You're like, hey, thanks a lot. I'm working hard on my Nordic god, but I just really feel like I'm a novice. I'm still a Nordic novice on this heathenry. All right, see y'all. Bye.